ہماری خوش قسمتی ہے کہ یہ پہلا کیپٹن عباس علی میموریل لیکچر دینے کے لیے ہندوستان کے مائع ناز تاریخ داں ہسٹورین پدم بھوشن عرفان حبیب صاحب علی گڑھ سے چل کر کے تشریف لائے ہیں اور وہ یہ پہلا کیپٹن عباس علی میموریل لیکچر دیں گے۔ میں آپ سب کا تہہ دل سے شکریہ ادا کرتا ہوں اس پروگرام میں شامل ہونے کے لیے، یہاں آنے کے لیے، اور اس سیٹرڈے کی صبح میں آپ کو زحمت ہوئی ہوگی۔ تو میں سب سے پہلے جو یہ پروگرام آرگنائز کیا جا رہا ہے یہ انڈیا اسلامک کلچر سینٹر کی طرف سے، اور اس کے روح رواں ہیں جناب صفدر خان صاحب۔
سب سے پہلے تو میں آپ سب کا شکر گزار ہوں کہ آپ لوگ تشریف لائے، اور عباس علی صاحب جہاں کا میں رہنے والا ہوں خرجہ کا، وہیں کے وہ رہنے والے تھے، اور ان کے ساتھ 2-3 بار میرا اتفاق ہوا ان سے ملنے کا، ان کے پاس بیٹھنے کا۔ ایک بار میرے والد کی طبیعت خراب تھی، وہ دیکھنے کے لیے گھر پہ میرے پہنچے۔ جو ان سے بیٹھ کے باتیں ہوتی تھیں اس سے جو بزرگیت جو کہنا چاہیے وہ ٹپکتی تھی، جو باتیں وہ کرتے تھے، اور جو پرانا سب سے پہلے تو میں آپ سب کا شکر گزار ہوں کہ آپ لوگ تشریف لائے، اور عباس علی صاحب جہاں کا میں رہنے والا ہوں خرجہ کا، وہیں کے وہ رہنے والے تھے، اور ان کے ساتھ 2-3 بار میرا اتفاق ہوا ان سے ملنے کا، ان کے پاس بیٹھنے کا۔ ایک بار میرے والد کی طبیعت خراب تھی، وہ دیکھنے کے لیے گھر پہ میرے پہنچے۔ جو ان سے بیٹھ کے باتیں ہوتی تھیں اس سے جو بزرگیت جو کہنا چاہیے وہ ٹپکتی تھی، جو باتیں وہ کرتے تھے، اور جو پرانا قصے سناتے تھے، اس کا کوئی جواب نہیں تھا جس طریقے سے وہ سناتے تھے۔ اور ہمیں بڑا افسوس ہے کہ آج ہم لوگوں کے ساتھ نہیں ہیں۔ میں کیپٹن عباسی صاحب 3 جنوری 1920 میں پیدا ہوئے تھے، اور خرجہ میں قلندر گڑھی ایک جگہ ہے وہاں کے رہنے والے تھے، اور جس اسکول میں، جس کالجز میں ہم نے بھی ہائی اسکول جہاں سے کیا ہے، وہیں سے ہائی اسکول عباس علی صاحب نے بھی کیا تھا۔ اور اس کے بعد وہ بھی علی گڑھ تشریف لے گئے ہائی اسکول کے بعد، میں بھی ہائی اسکول کے بعد تشریف لے گیا، میں بھی چلا گیا وہاں پر، اور ہم نے بھی ایم اے کیا سائیکالوجی سے، انہوں نے بھی وہیں سے گریجویشن پوسٹ گریجویشن کیا۔ اور شروع سے یہ بہت فریڈم فائٹر، میں آپ سب کا بہت شکر گزار ہوں انڈیا اسلامک کلچر سینٹر کی جانب سے، اور مجھے خوشی ہے کہ یہ فرسٹ کیپٹن عباسی میموریل لیکچر جو ہو رہا ہے بہت ضروری تھا۔ میں اتنا ہی کہنا چاہوں گا، بہت بہت شکریہ۔
Now I would like to request Professor Irfan Habib to deliver first Captain Abbas Ali Memorial Lecture.
Distinguished guests, members of the India Islamic Culture Center, ladies and gentlemen, I must confess that I was nervous before delivering this lecture in the presence of such an august audience, with people present here who know more about the Indian National Army than I can ever hope to do. The nervousness has been increased by the profuse praises that have been showered on me, because after those I am sure to disappoint by whatever I say before this audience. I was thinking that Mr. Qurban Ali was speaking of some other individual than yours truly. However, I must now proceed with the task that has been assigned to me by Mr. Qurban Ali. Captain Abbas Ali, as he has already said here, was a member of the Indian National Army, and when Mr. Qurban Ali suggested to me that I should deliver the first lecture in his memory, I thought that the best or most suitable topic would be the legacy of the Indian National Army, the legacy of INA, despite the fact that this is not part of the field of my researches. But it is part of my life story, so to speak, because I was a schoolboy when information. Distinguished guests, members of the India Islamic Culture Center, ladies and gentlemen, I must confess that I was nervous before delivering this lecture in the presence of such an august audience, with people present here who know more about the Indian National Army than I can ever hope to do. The nervousness has been increased by the profuse praises that have been showered on me, because after those I am sure to disappoint by whatever I say before this audience. I was thinking that Mr. Qurban Ali was speaking of some other individual than yours truly. However, I must now proceed with the task that has been assigned to me by Mr. Qurban Ali. Captain Abbas Ali, as he has already said here, was a member of the Indian National Army. And when Mr. Qurban Ali suggested to me that I should deliver the first lecture in his memory, I thought that the best or most suitable topic would be the legacy of the Indian National Army, the legacy of INA, despite the fact that this is not part of the field of my researches. But it is part of my life story, so to speak, because I was a schoolboy when information about INA burst upon India in 1945. I think it would be fair to say that Indian people knew about the INA only when Japan surrendered, or the new character of the national movement, the changed character of the national movement was recognized by the Karachi Resolution. The Congress session passed the Karachi Resolution. At Karachi passed the resolution on fundamental rights in March 1931, after the suspension of the civil disobedience. That formed a new program of the Congress, that the rights, that there should be a adult franchise, men and women should have equality, workers' rights should be protected, basic industries must be under state control and ownership, also means of transport, land to the cultivator, and deep-going agrarian reform. All these were promised for the first time. And from then on, both workers' organizations and peasants' organizations gained in strength, and this was reflected in what happened at Tripuri session of the ICC. Subhas Bose was undoubtedly one of the major leaders of the left, along with Jawaharlal Nehru. Perhaps if at that time somebody had asked who could represent the national movement most, people would have answered Gandhiji, Pandit Nehru, and Subhash Chandra Bose, perhaps in that order. This was not only in the situation of individuals, this was because the character of the national movement had changed. There were differences within the left. Jawaharlal Nehru had announced in Glimpses of World History and autobiography that he was an atheist. He thought that only idiots believe in afterlife. He did not believe in God. Subhas Bose, to the end of his life, remained a believer in God. So there were basic differences. These I don't regard as peripheral differences. These are basic differences in outlook. Nevertheless, they realized that a kind of socialist India would be the only goal which will bring all the masses of India together. Their view about that socialism might be different, but they recognized that a capitalist system and a landlord system could not be attractive enough for the Indian masses. The left included socialists and communists at that time, and Tripurari represented perhaps the most powerful movement of the existence of the left in the national movement. Now, at that time, the world situation suddenly changed. The war began in October 1939, and the Congress ministries resigned, because Britain included India in its declaration of war against Hitler. Hitler's cause was unspeakable. The Nazi racialist theory could not appeal to non-Aryans or non-whites like Indians. Nevertheless, because of the fact that India was enslaved by Britain, there was an innate lack of sympathy in the ranks of the national movement for Britain. And therefore, a sense that this was not India's war was quite rampant in the national movement. In fact, when Gandhiji spoke in favor of Britain and France, he probably did not represent the popular opinion. Here, the first rifts in the left were apparent. Pandit Nehru knew about the nature of fascism and was therefore totally hostile to Germany. And he hoped, as he said in his addendum to his autobiography, that there would be time when Russia and America would enter the war against Germany. This was not the opinion of Subhas Bose and his followers, and who particularly admired Mussolini and who thought that any enemy of England was a friend of India. This, I think, was the beginning of two strategies within the nationalist left. Subhas Bose, as we know, remained all the time a friend of the Soviet Union. He didn't have equal sympathy with the Chinese resistance to Japan. I'm not entering into these details, I'm just stating the facts as they appear from his own statement. But it seemed in the first 1.5 years of the war that there was, if not an alliance, an understanding between Germany, Soviet Union, and Japan, and that this was their view about that socialism might be different, but they recognized that a capitalist system and a landlord system could not be attractive enough for the Indian masses. The left included socialists and communists at that time, and Tripurari represented perhaps the most powerful movement of the existence of the left in the national movement. Now, at that time, the world situation suddenly changed. The war began in October 1939, and the Congress ministries resigned because Britain included India in his declaration of war against Hitler. Hitler's cause was unspeakable. The Nazi racialist theory could not appeal to non-Aryans or non-whites like Indians. Nevertheless, because of the fact that India was enslaved by Britain, there was an innate lack of sympathy in the ranks of the national movement for Britain. And therefore, a sense that this was not India's war was quite rampant in the national movement. In fact, when Gandhiji spoke in favor of Britain and France, he probably did not represent the popular opinion. Here, the first rifts in the left were apparent. Pandit Nehru knew about the nature of fascism and was therefore totally hostile to Germany. And he hoped, as he said in his addendum to his autobiography, that there would be time when Russia and America would enter the war against Germany. This was not the opinion of Subhas Bose and his followers, and who particularly admired Mussolini and who thought that any enemy of England was a friend of India. This, I think, was the beginning of two strategies within the nationalist left. Subhas Bose, as we know, remained all the time a friend of the Soviet Union. He didn't have equal sympathy with the Chinese resistance to Japan. I'm not entering into these details, I'm just stating the facts as they appear from his own statement. But it seemed in the first 1.5 years of the war that there was, if not an alliance, an understanding between Germany, Soviet Union and Japan, and that this was an understanding within anti-imperialist powers. And therefore, Subhas Bose's decision to escape from India and go to Germany via Russia is understandable. We must remember that he left India in January 1941 when England was alone, practically alone, in standing up to Germany and Italy. Formally speaking, Russia and Germany were bound together by the Non-Aggression Pact of 1939. No outsider could know that Germany was preparing to invade Soviet Union. It was also very difficult to know, as Soviet leaders perhaps ought to have known at that time, that over issues like Yugoslavia and Greece and Finland, Soviet Union and Germany had fundamental differences. Bose could not have known it, and as we know, he went to Germany through Russia, through Soviet Union, and arrived in Berlin in the first week of April 1941. Things became immediately complicated when Hitler attacked Soviet Union on 22nd June 1941. We now know that this put Bose in a mental crisis. His understanding of what were the two lines drawn in the First World War was completely shattered. But to the end, to his honor, he didn't join Germany in any denunciation of the Soviet Union. Of course, with Japan, it is what was the other case, because Japan itself did not go to war with the USSR. However, once he had arrived in Germany, Bose began to prepare for an army within Europe. There were a large number of prisoners of war, which the Italians had captured and were now transferred to Germany. An Indian division was being trained in Germany. But then the situation suddenly changed when early in December 1941, Japan too joined the war, not against Soviet Union, but by attacking Pearl Harbor and therefore, when the Indian Independence League, formed in Thailand by Gyani Pritam Singh, that was accompanied the Japanese into Malaya, and Indian troops were actually surrendered by their British officials, so to speak, to the Japanese. Then they began to respond to Pritam Singh's and appeals that they should form a separate army, an army of the Indian Independence League. And Captain Mohan Singh, Sardar Mohan Singh, was certainly the major figure who first formed the Indian National Army. He belonged to the earliest detachments of the Indians who, as I say, were surrendered to the Japanese by their British officers in Malaya. Mohan Singh is sometimes forgotten, but I think he is a very notable figure and ought to receive his due. British intelligence paid its own tribute to Mohan Singh. Mohan Singh, we are told in one of its reports, has got no weakness, unfortunately, they should have added, in the form of greed, lust, drink, women, etc., as far as one can find out. They also say that he was an eloquent speaker, and certainly his speech 2 days after the fall of Singapore to Japanese on 15th February 1942 was remarkable for the effect it had on Indian soldiers who were brought together in their thousands to listen to him. With Rash Behari Bose, an old revolutionary, who had fled to Japan in order to escape prosecution in India and perhaps execution, he formed the Indian National Army. Pritam Singh unfortunately died in an air crash. I would not go into details because that would take time. I want to confine myself to the major events and processes. What is important in the case of Mohan Singh is his ability to gather Indian soldiers despite the fact that they belong to different regions and religions. His main colleague was Captain Akram, a first sign that there was a very strong belief in the Indian National Army that religious differences should not count. Unfortunately, Akram was also killed along with Pritam Singh in the plane crash. Mohan Singh was ultimately able, according to the British intelligence, of building up an Indian National Army of the effective strength of 12,000. You must remember that they had very great financial difficulties. The Japanese would not fund them sufficiently. They would not give them arms, except very small arms, or except what had been saved from what they had from the British. And the 3 million strong population of Southeast Asia was always also not sure how far they should help the INA. There were the British, and a report of the British agent suggested that there were differences because the Muslims in many parts of South Asia supported Muslim League, whereas Pritam Singh and Mohan Singh had declared their loyalty to Mahatma Gandhi and the Congress. Nevertheless, it shows the farsightedness of Mohan Singh that he continued to make appeal to the Muslims, and he made the song of the INA, Iqbal's famous poem, Sare Jahan Se Achha Hindustan Hamara, which despite its naivete, everyone considers that their own country is the best in the world, so there's nothing new about it. But despite its naivete, it made great appeal to the Indians everywhere, and I believe it is also today, owing to the INA, the army song of our people, our country. How far it remains, how long it remains, I doubt now, under the present dispensation, but up till now it has remained. And therefore, when the Indian Independence League, formed in Thailand by Gyani Pritam Singh, that was accompanied the Japanese into Malaya, and Indian troops were actually surrendered by their British officials, so to speak, to the Japanese. Then they began to respond to Pritam Singh's and appeals that they should form a separate army, an army of the Indian Independence League. And Captain Mohan Singh, Sardar Mohan Singh, was certainly the major figure who first formed the Indian National. Mohan Singh was able only to send small groups on the front. British intelligence reported already in 1942 that in certain attacks on their frontier positions in India, Japanese attacks, there were war cries in Punjabi, both by Sikh and other soldiers. But there were also desertions from the INA, one major desertion being by one Major Dhillon, with the complicity of his superior, Colonel Gill, who was then imprisoned by the Japanese. This incident unfortunately intensified for Mohan Singh, intensified his differences with the Japanese, and ultimately Mohan Singh was dismissed by Rash Bihari Bose on 27th December 1942. Militarily, if you go only by the military situation, the best time for INA was late 1942. Britain and America had not been able to bring large number of troops into Assam by that time. That was the time when any invasion of Assam had perhaps some chance of success. Germans were advancing towards Stalingrad. Japan seemed almost dominant in Pacific and Southeast Asia. And within India, the Quit India movement had taken place in August 1942. This was a great morale booster to the INA. Gandhiji's arrest, the arrest of Pandit Nehru and other Congress leaders, was always shown in INA propaganda and publicity as a fact that showed that these leaders were also on the same side as INA. It was, of course, forgotten that in the Quit India resolution, it had been made clear that the Congress was on the side of the Allies in World War II. But the fact that a movement against the British had been launched was an important morale booster for the INA, but unfortunately even that advantage was wasted in the dissolution of the INA in December 1942. So we must remember that the point where if Subhas Bose had been present, then things might have turned differently. When Subhas Bose arrived in India, in Southeast Asia, then that time was over. Subhas Bose left Germany by U-boat on February 8, 1943. By that time, the tide of war had turned. Hitler had been defeated at Stalingrad. Throughout 1943, his Eastern Front would crumble. The offensive citadel would fail miserably, and much of Ukraine and Byelorussia would be regained by the Soviet Union. Japan also began to suffer air raids from the United States, not only its possessions but Japan itself. Subhas Bose was able to reach Southeast Asia only in May 1943 by submarine. On 5 July, he took salute of the INA men at Singapore. Now, Subhash Chandra Bose, in Germany, he had begun to be called Netaji, and in Germany also the name Azad Hind had been coined, and the figure and the flag, the Congress tricolor with tiger on it, jumping tiger in it, had been invented. And Jana Gana Mana, also taken as the national anthem. Bose knew the Muslim hesitation to, perhaps unreasonable hesitation, to accept the Bande Mataram, although the Pathans used to shout Allahu Akbar Bande Mataram, but otherwise the Muslims had some objection, and therefore Jana Gana Mana was the song that Bose had adopted. With this baggage of nomenclature, let us say, and ideas, and with the slogan Chalo Dilli, Bose injected a new life into the INA, and then he formed the Provisional Azad Hind government on 21 October 1943. He obtained from Japan, which General Mohan Singh had been unable to obtain, a recognition of the government of Azad Hind at par with other states like the government of Thailand, the Nanking government, puppet government perhaps, but also recognized as independent by the Japanese, although it was their puppet, the government of Manchukuo, the government of Philippines, all rather subordinate and puppet governments, that of Burma, and now Azad Hind government. But The point to remember is that Azad Hind government was perhaps, despite having no territory under it, was perhaps the freest and most independent of all these, among all these other governments. Subhash Chandra Bose was able to obtain recognition of a status from the Japanese government which other so-called partners of Japan had not been able to obtain. It was now under Subhas Bose that INA began to enter into military operations effectively, first in Arakan and then on the Indian border of Assam, or what was then the province of Assam. Today, the area involved, which is so-called of the Imphal campaign, is partly that of Manipur and partly Nagaland. When the invasion of Manipur and Nagaland was undertaken by the Japanese, it was perhaps already too late for any military operation. By 1944, Japan was harassed by American raids and invasions of its Southeast Asian possessions. With these effective 4 divisions and with no air cover, it was difficult to say why the Japanese, against the views of their own commander-in-chief in Burma, General Ayabe, why they then launched this invasion. It is now apparent that this was under the pressure of Subhas Bose himself. This shows the influence that Subhas Bose had now come to exercise over Japan, that they were prepared to undertake an invasion which would ultimately weaken very badly their military position in Burma. Because when they attacked in the early summer of 1944, they attacked Manipur and Nagaland. They did not have the strength to launch a campaign alone which could have had any success, and that was to attack, to go through the passes and seize Dimapur from where the plains began. Dimapur was on the Assam-Nagaland border. For some time, for 2 months, they did occupy Morang, south of Imphal, which is fairly deep into Manipur territory. And that was one area which the INA controlled for 2.5 months, on which their flag flew. But the Japanese were defeated and badly mauled. As you know, Japanese soldiers fought to death, and perhaps that was another mistake. They retreated far too late because the Indian National Army did not have heavy weapons. They asked the INA to retreat first. So INA was not mauled so much as the Japanese themselves, and the road was therefore cleared for British advance into Burma. In the meantime, Subhas Bose had to leave Rangoon and come to Bangkok, and then going to the atom bombs dropped on Japan, first on Hiroshima and then Nagasaki, and then the Soviet invasion of Manchuria. Japan surrendered on 15th August 1945. The fact that it would be surrendering came to be known to Bose 3 days earlier. Now, there's no use going into details. We know that Subhash Chandra Bose wanted to go to Russia. He still thought that Soviet Union would be the only power which would be able to stand up to British and American imperialism. But this particular adventure of his was never brought to the test. While he had been accompanied in his U-boat to Japan by a Muslim officer from Germany, Abid Hassan, he was now accompanied by another Muslim officer, Habibur Rahman from INA, who lived to tell the tale. There were very great reasons why, when INA prisoners began to arrive in India and the news about INA's organization, INA's Azad Hind government began to be popularized in India. Every newspaper printed it. Its secular character, its exhibition of organizing abilities of Indians, its ability to fight the British. As we know now, British intelligence reports also indicated from the front that the fighting quality of INA, as one report says, was good. The Japanese noted that desertions from the INA were few and far between, that many people in Southeast Asia donated their all, poor and rich, to the INA. The greatest donor, we were told, to the INA was one Mr. Habib of Rangoon, who donated all his property to the Azad Hind Fauj. In a polity which was then so far divided into two communal camps, unfortunately, as Gandhiji freely admitted, despite its secular views, the Congress in effect had become a caste Hindu party. These are not my words, these are Gandhiji's own words. So, despite its trying, Muslims had rejected, as they would in 1946, the Congress. And in over 80% they would vote for the Muslim League. So, and then there was the virulence of the Hindu Mahasabha. To all this, the INA posed a totally different model. Their mode of salutation, Jai Hind, was now to become normal in Indian political discourse, especially in the national movement and especially in the Congress. The British had their discussions, which are now clear in Mansell's volumes, or from Mansell's volumes of Transfer of Power and others, that how to treat the INA became a problem, not because the British wanted to wash off what in their view was treason, but because of Indian public opinion. They first tried a direct trial of the early prisoners of INA, headed by General Shah Nawaz, Major General Shah Nawaz. I am citing them by their INA ranks: Major General Shah Nawaz, Colonel P.K. Sehgal, and Colonel Gurbaksh Singh Dhillon. They were to be tried in Red Fort, and it was then to be tested what this treason trial would evoke from Indian opinion. What it evoked from Indian opinion was shown by the unanimous decision of the Congress Working Committee to go for a defense committee, which was headed, surprise of surprises, by the most moderate of moderate leaders, Sir Tej Bahadur Sapru. Sir Tej Bahadur Sapru had been a consistent collaborator with the British government. A very fine Urdu scholar, very good secular views, but a very great and sincere admirer of British constitutionalism. Side by side with a person he never liked, Jawaharlal Nehru, Bhola Bhai Desai, K.N. Kardju, P. Saran, Badri Das, and Asif Ali. So it was clear that the British government's attempt would be defied. And I think the Congress Working Committee deserves our praise. They made it clear that their opinion was different from the opinion of the INA, but they also made it clear that the INA men were patriots. Now, this feeling was shared on the ground, and I think one of the major contributions of INA was, apart from its resistance, apart from its martyrs in the fight, was its effect on Indian national opinion. On 21 to 23 November, Calcutta demonstrations first showed, in which Forward Bloc, Congress and Communist demonstrators took part against INA trials and for their release, that Britain could not rule in the old way. For the first time, British troops were used against Indian crowds. And it was first found that despite firing, in which 33 were killed, the crowd would not disperse. This was followed in Calcutta by the sentence of 7 years rigorous imprisonment against Abdul Rashid, who was put on separate trial and whose defense was undertaken by the Muslim League. This also resulted in a common demonstration in Calcutta from 11-13 February 1946, in which 84 were killed. We know that in the meantime, Shah Nawaz Khan and his two co-accused had been sentenced to life imprisonment, but then that had been reduced to mere dismissal by the Commander-in-Chief. It was clear that such imprisonments would have enormous consequences. But there was another event which only INA could have brought about, and that was the Royal Indian Navy mutiny in Bombay on 18th February, which lasted till 23 February, involving 78 ships of the Indian Navy. And total strike and crowd violence against the British in Bombay. The British brought in British troops, the Leicester Regiment, Essex Regiment, British Artillery, and Royal Marines to suppress RIN and civil disturbances. The RIN mutineers not only called for unconditional release of INA men apart from their own demands, but this is important. But in their final statement, when they said they were surrendering to India,
not Britain, there that statement ended with the cry, Jai Hind. Now the RIN mutiny was therefore again an extension and of the INA struggle, because it is impossible to visualize it had not INA been there as a model, and had not INA slogans been imbibed by Indian sailors and soldiers. Now, one of the tragedies in India is that after the RIN mutiny, we seem to have forgotten both the INA and the RIN mutiny. The RIN mutineers also raised both the Congress and the Muslim League flags. Their leader was one M.S. Khan, a sailor. Hindus and Muslims fought together in the RIN mutiny. So also the crowds in Bombay. A cousin of mine, whom I saw later, who was in Bombay, told me that the crowds wanted all the ties to be removed. You could only walk on the streets of Bombay in this period if you didn't have a tie. So he had to remove his tie and put it in his pocket. So strong was the anti-British feeling in Bombay among all Indians. But soon, within a year, Hindus and Muslims would be at each other's throat. And within 1 year and a half, the country would be partitioned. One must remember that INA always spoke of a united and undivided India, both under Mohan Singh and under Subhas Bose. Subhas Bose too he would want all the concessions given to Muslims, but not the partition of the country. Clearly, the slaughter, mutual slaughter, was a kind of rejection, a rebuff to all that the INA stood for. Therefore, today, I think it is doubly important not only for us not only to pay tribute, continue to pay tribute to the Indian National Army, but thank you. But also to hold high the banners that the INA had raised, the Azad Hind Fauj had raised. The banner of national dignity, unity, and communal brotherhood. And also secularism, not the kind of secularism of the Supreme Court in which all religions are good, and if you teach religious instruction, if you have instruction in religion, that is all right, and the constitutional provision of the prohibition of religious instruction can be set aside, but real secularism, in which every community, every section of the population has its place. So for that reason, I particularly welcome the fact that we are celebrating through these lectures the memory of one INA soldier, Captain Abbas Ali, and through that celebration, we are also celebrating INA and its great achievements. Thank you.